Hey guys, welcome back to another installment in my Other Games I Play series. We're back in Orbiter. The first video that I made of Orbiter was a flight out to the moon, and that had a pretty positive response. I got some good comments and everything, so thought it might be fun to make another video. And since we went to the moon in the first video, I thought it would only be appropriate to fly back to Earth from the moon. So that's what we're going to do in this one. As you can see, we're sitting on pad 1 at Brighton Beach on the moon, which is where we landed in the first video. This isn't a direct continuation of that flight. This is a separate scenario that I had saved previously, so rather than have to set everything up again, I'm just using one of my other scenarios. So this is taking place on Friday, October 7th at about 6:01 GMT 2022. So let's jump in the cockpit here, bring up the HUD. Now, I should mention, going to the moon is pretty easy. I mean, if you've never done it before, it can be challenging, but in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty easy, and so much more easy than going back to Earth from the moon. Or going back to Earth from any of the planets, because Earth has an atmosphere. So unless you're just planning on going back to Earth and getting into orbit, which is relatively easy, if you are planning on re-entering the atmosphere and landing, it's a lot more complex. And since I showed a really simple way of getting to the moon, I'm going to show a much more, and probably the most complex way to get back to Earth, in that we're going to attempt to set up a burn so that we only have to make a single burn back to Earth. We'll arrive exactly where we need to when we get there, at the correct altitude and the correct place around the globe, in order to land at the base I'm going to land at, which is CSSC. And CSSC stands for the Carl Sagan Space Center, which is a fictitious base in the Pacific Ocean, in and around the Pacific Islands. I guess it would be, well, it's almost right on the equator, actually. But that's where we're going to land. So we want to make a single burn, not make any correction burns on our way back, hit the atmosphere at the exact right time, re-enter, slow down, descend, and land at the base. So that's going to take a lot more calculations than the first flight of just taking off, getting into orbit, and then calculating a trajectory to the moon, and then making corrections in order to arrive at the moon at the proper place and time. So, first of all, let me switch over this view so that it's easier to see these. So let's bring up the map here. And this is a map of the moon because that's what we're sitting on. So I'm going to change it to, change it to the Earth. I'm going to target CSSC, because that's the base we're going to. And I'm going to move the map over so that it's more in the center here, and I might zoom in a little bit. Alright, so here's CSSC. It's located at 169.53 degrees east and 0.85 degrees south. So it's less than half a degree south of the equator. This line here is the equator, and each of these lines, the vertical and horizontal, are 30 degrees. So since this is 169, then this line here is 150. This one's 120, this one's 90, and if we zoom out a little bit, you can actually here's the meridian, which is 0, so 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, and then this would be 180. So that gives you an idea of where the base is on Earth. Basically the South Pacific. So now that you have that information, I'm going to go ahead and bring up Interplanetary, and I'm going to use the base approach program in this case. I'm going to, it's already referencing the Earth, so I'm going to change my source to the Moon. Okay, and then I'm going to target CSSC. And as you can see, like, I'll bring it up over here on the map, it's showing 169.53. Here it actually shows 0.52, so there's probably rounding happening here that isn't happening here. And then 0.853 degrees south. So that's the same information that we see on the map. And then I need to set some variables here. Need to go back to the other page. So without getting too technical, you need to have a certain altitude. I should say the lowest altitude that you want to have when you get back to Earth is dependent upon your velocity when you get back there. It's dependent upon the type of craft you have, whether it's, you know, a shuttle type craft or if it's a capsule, etc. But for this craft, the XR2 Ravenstar that we're going to be flying back, we want our altitude when we get back to be about 60 to 65 kilometers above the surface when we get to Earth. So I'm just going to set it to 65. Oops, not meters. 65 kilometers. These next two, well, specifically this variable here is sometimes hard for people to wrap their head around, but this is the re-entry angle. In this case, we're going to set it for 5.5 degrees. And basically that means, I mean, if we're looking at this, let's say this is the atmosphere of the Earth, we want to come in basically a 5.5 degree angle into the atmosphere. If it's too much of an angle, if we're coming down, straight down into the atmosphere, we're going to burn up and die. If it's too low of an angle, I mean, if it's really low, we might just miss altogether. But if it's too low, you can come in and you won't capture enough of the atmosphere to slow down, and you'll just skip right back out. In this case, for this example, it's 5.5 degrees thereabouts, but we're not going to go through all of the physics involved with that. Our next variable that we need to set here is the anticipation angle, and this is how far in front of the base we want to hit the atmosphere. So looking at the map back over here again, each of these boxes is 30 degrees by 30 degrees, and in our particular case we want to arrive 45 degrees before we get there, because we're going to be traveling from west to east. And we're going to need to have time to enter the atmosphere, slow down, decrease our altitude, and then land at the base. And we want about 45, you can do it in as little as 30 degrees, but that makes your re-entry a lot crazier. So anywhere between 30 and 45 degrees or more. You wouldn't want to do too much more, but I like to set this around 45 degrees prior. So 45 degrees would be 1.5 of these boxes, so that would be 30, 45. So we want to do about 124, because if you subtract 45 from 169, It'd be about 124 degrees, which is about where my mouse is. We'll hit the atmosphere there, start slowing down and descending, and then land at the base. So let's set that to 45-degree anticipation. And then Interplanetary is able to calculate a rough idea. Let me see how I can explain this. This hint variable, as I increase it, it's going to go ahead by 1/10 of a day each time. A day is about 86,400 seconds. So as I click this, it's doing calculations in the background to try to find a solution that will get me 45 degrees before Carl Sagan Space Center, have me arrive with a re-entry angle of 5.5 degrees, and my lowest point when I get here is going to be 65 kilometers above the surface. If that makes any sense at all, that's what it's doing. And you can see I clicked it a couple times already and it's not finding a solution. So we'll keep clicking it. Okay, now it found one solution. What this is telling us is we would have to use, not exactly, but about 6 kilometers per second of delta velocity. And it would actually get us back to Earth in less than a day. Because we would be leaving here and we would be arriving basically on the same day, 859.907, and we would leave 859.259. So way less than a day, less than half a day actually, or about half a day. It's about 12 hours. That's way too fast. We don't want to get back that quickly. So I'm going to keep moving the hint forward. Okay, it's found another solution here. In this solution, we'd be leaving at about the same time, and we would arrive 148,000 seconds later. So it's about a day and a half. So that's about a day and a half, and we would have to use about 1,715 delta V. That's still way too quick. The most fuel efficient is about 3.5 days, just like when you're coming to the moon from Earth. So let's keep clicking forward and find the next solution. And if we had to do all of this by hand, it would take forever, which is why most space travel missions are planned months, if not years, even decades in advance. Okay, here we have another solution. This will get us back to Earth in about 2.5 days. Let's keep going forward. Okay, here's another solution. This is getting pretty close here. This one is about a little less than 3 days. No, a little over 3 days. But I think we can do a little bit better, so let's try to find one more solution here. And it's probably going to be the one that we're going to use. There we go. So we'll leave on 859.260. And we'll arrive at 864.015. So it's a little over 3.5 days. We're going to use 869.8 meters of delta V, which is a lot less than that first solution that it found, which was like 6,000 meters per second of delta V. So this is the plan that we're going to use. And you can see down here, it'll take 410,800 seconds to get back to Earth. This is our arrival date. Our re-entry, or our basically our PE velocity, or the fastest speed when we get there, is going to be 10.6 kilometers per second. Our re-entry angle is going to be 5.501 degrees. And I'm not sure what this number is, so don't ask. Alright, so now that that's set, we can use this information in a different program within Interplanetary, and it will take these calculations and turn it into a launch heading for us so that we can get into the proper orbit around the moon in order to make a burn back to Earth and be in the proper alignment. So let's switch over. We're going to go to Surface Launch, and I'm going to set it to the Base Approach program. I'm going to set the altitude that I want at the moon to 20 kilometers because that's just the altitude I like to fly around the moon. And there's a lot of numbers and everything here, but all you really need to worry about is this heading. So I need to take off from the moon. If I turn on the surface HUD here, I'm going to hover up off the pad. I'm going to turn, these are my degrees up here, I'm going to turn to 68 degrees. It's a little over 68, but it'll be close enough. And then start firing the main engines to get into orbit around the moon. And we're shooting for a 20-kilometer orbit above the moon. And also, once I take off, this EIN number is going to start changing, and I want that to be as close to or at 0 by the time I get to orbit. Otherwise, I can make some little corrective burns to make sure that I'm in the correct plane. I'm not going to explain what all of that means because it would take hours just to explain all of that, but basically we're just trying to fly around the moon in the right plane so that when we fire our engines, we're going in the right direction, which in our case is back to Earth. So, I have a few things that I need to do. First of all, I want to bring up orbit on this side. I want to auto-reference so that it's moon. I want to be from the equator. Projection ship is correct. That's all right. Okay, I'm going to switch back to the other view because I'm going to need to be able to see some of these other buttons and controls and stuff because I don't remember all of the hotkeys. There are pages and pages in the orbital manual as far as what all the different keyboard controls are for this program, and I only have maybe half of them memorized. But I need to go down to the lower panel. I'm going to turn off my external cooling.
Onboard O2.
I have 6 days of oxygen on board. I have 2 crew members, so that's plenty. I've also reduced the fuel down to 40% because I don't want to bring any extra weight. So I'm going to turn on the APU because I want to open my retro doors, which opens the covers over my retro engines in case I need to make a corrective burn if I overshoot my APA or something. My hover doors, because I'm going to have to hover. I'm going to open the radiator because my electronics are going to start reheating now that I'm on internal power. And the landing gear is already down because we're landed. So if I look outside here, you can see better on this side. So these are my retro engines here. Those opened up. You can see the doors under here have uncovered my hover engines. And from the last video, you probably remember my radiator is now open because we don't want to fry our computer on the way back to Earth, that is for sure. Okay, I'm going to turn the APU back off because it's burning fuel for no reason.
Rotation.
I'm going to turn on my rotation thrusters so that once I start hovering, I can rotate to 68 degrees. And some things I'm going to be wanting to watch for as we go here. I'm going to be watching my PEA as my orbit progresses, and you'll see, like before, these lines will turn into circles and start wrapping around the moon. But I also need to watch this EIN number because I want that to be 0 when I get to orbit. And it can be a little tricky because you're watching your vertical speed and your horizontal speed at the same time. And you're in space. So you can't use any of your, I guess, aerodynamic controls like your ailerons. I guess these are considered elevons on this particular craft, or your rudder or anything like that. So we're going to go ahead and add some, well, actually I also want to, and you don't have to do this, but I like to turn on my lights if I'm going to be flying in or out of a base, just for realism's sake. So I'm going to add some hover so we can get up off of the pad. I'm going to turn to 68 degrees, and then I'm going to start firing the main engines so that we can try to start getting into orbit. I'm going to kill the hover engines and then pitch to make sure that we don't crash back into the moon. And then I'm going to be watching this EIN number and the APA number. And hopefully everything will come together. So let's go. Adding some hover. Here we're off. Take some of that hover out. I don't need quite that much. Okay, I'm going to rotate. I can take a quick look outside and you can see what's happening here. I'm going to rotate to 68 degrees, which is our calculated launch heading. Right about there. I'm going to start applying main engines. Okay, we have full main engines. I'm going to open the AP, or start the APU, put up my landing gear.
Gear up and locked.
Okay, now that we have some forward velocity, I'm going to go ahead and kill the hover engines, and you will see that we will start to fall. Let me change this projection over here so it's easier to see. We are still increasing, but once this velocity vector drops below the horizon, we'll actually be falling. And you get to orbit really quickly on the moon, so you can see how quickly my orbit is progressing here. I'm actually going to nose down a little bit to try to slow that down. And I'm going to reduce my power on my main engines. Okay. So that we go a little bit slower. Things happen really quick. I'm also going to yaw the vessel a little bit. Try to correct that angle. Alright, we're already at a 20 kilometer PEA. I did not correct the angle as much as I wanted to because I was doing too much explanation while I was trying to get into orbit. So you can see, let me get back on the center line here. So that's how quick that initial orbit goes, whereas on Earth it took, what, about 11 or 12 minutes to get into orbit? Big difference when you have an atmosphere and a lot more gravity to deal with.
Translation.
So let's switch over to this other view for a second here so you can see what's going on. So our orbit isn't quite around the moon, so we will have to make an orbit insert burn once we get to our apoapsis. But I also need to make a correction to my ejection inclination, which is off by negative 0.71 degrees, which is actually a lot. So I'm going to just use the translation thrusters, which will burn either left or right. I'm going to see. Okay, so I'm burning the left engine. I'm pushing myself to the left. So I'm actually burning the right engines. If we look outside, The RCS thrusters, you can see they're burning here and here, pushing me to the left. And my ejection inclination is coming down. I want that to be 0. Normally I don't have this big of a correction to make. I'm usually pretty good about getting into orbit without having any adjustment to my ejection inclination, but once you get talking, it's just a little bit too much for your brain to handle. So I overshot a little bit. Let's get this fixed here. Alright, we're at 0. So now our next order of business, because we're just going to come around here and crash back into the moon, and we will absolutely crash into the moon because we can't glide. There's no atmosphere. So we need to, I'll do it on this side, we need to circularize our orbit. And I'm going to let the computer do that again, just like I did when we got into orbit at Earth. We're going to make a burn in about 300 seconds. And it's only going to be a 2.2 second burn, and then that will complete our orbit. And we'll be about 20 kilometers above the surface all the way around the moon. Now that we're up here and I'm not going to make any more corrections, I also want to get back inside, turn on the APU. I'm going to close the hover doors and the retro doors because I'm not going to need them for the remainder of the flight. I'll change this back to rotation. Turn the HUD on again. And let's use the prograde autopilot to get into the prograde position, because we'll need to be in that position in order to make our orbital maneuver, which in this case is an orbit insert burn. I go back to this big screen here, big view, so that you can see better. I know a lot of people watch on mobile devices, and it's impossible to see these screens on mobile devices, even in this view. It's kind of hard. And I'll use a little bit of 10x time warp to get a little bit closer to that burn time. Alright, we're about 34 seconds away. So yeah, this part of the flight was roughly calculated by Interplanetary by using the base approach program, which gave us a launch heading to get in the proper orbit around the moon. The next calculations that we need to make are going to be a lot more accurate, which you'll see as we move forward. Okay, the engines are about to fire in about 2 seconds. Alright, so there you have it. If I go back to orbit, you can see our orbit is actually a little bit off, but our highest point is 21,360 meters. And our PEA, which is our lowest point of our orbit, is 20,570 meters, or 21 and 20 kilometers, basically. Either way, we aren't going to hit the moon, so that's good. So we're done with the surface launch program. Actually, my EIN is a little bit off again, so I'm going to see if I can
Translation.
make a quick correction to that. Just make a couple of little burns here. There we go. Alright, Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Now, I want to bring up the map program. Actually, do I want to bring up the map program right now, or... No. I want to bring up the orbit eject program. And what this program does is it's going to take that same plan that we made. I need to set it for it to the base approach. The same plan that we made with the base approach. This is calculating when we need to burn. So this is the moon. The green line is our orbit around the moon. This green line here is pointing to where we are in our orbit around the moon. So we need to go all the way around, burn our engines to get back to Earth. And it's going to be an 846.5 meter per second burn, which is a lot less than the over 3,000 it takes to come to the moon, because we're not really having to escape the Earth's gravity. In this case, we're actually benefiting from the Earth's gravity, because all we need to do is have enough velocity to escape the moon's gravity, and then the Earth will just pull us right back in. So it's a lot more fuel efficient to go back to the Earth than it is from the Earth. But we're actually not going to use this program because it's not accurate enough. So what I'm going to do is, on this side, I'm going to open another instance of Interplanetary. I'm going to go to the course program, open Delta Velocity. And Delta Velocity, or the Delta Velocity program, is where you can configure burns. You can put in your time to eject, your date of ejection, your forward velocity, your plane change, your inward, outward, in order to calculate a trajectory. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this rough calculation that base approach made, and we're going to take this information and stick it into our Delta Velocity program, where we can work with it and tweak it, because we're definitely going to have to tweak it. So the first thing I'm going to do is copy over our time of ejection, which is right here, which is 5,428 seconds. It doesn't have to be exact because we're going to be making changes to it, so I'll just go to 5,420 seconds. There we go. And the other one that I want to set over here is our delta velocity, which is 846.5. Alright, and then I'll change the projection here so that it looks the same. So you can see we basically made a copy of what's going on over here, but we made it over here where we can actually adjust these variables. And that's going to be important in the next few minutes here. Hopefully it's just going to take minutes to get this set up, because it can be it can be a little bit crazy trying to get this set up. So we're done with this program. So on this side, I'm now going to bring up the Interplanetary Map program. Now the map program is super accurate. It does, I don't know how many calculations per second, but it's doing all of the physics calculations based on the information that you input over here. So we can see, if I change, well, you can't see it right now. Let me finish getting it set up. I'm going to reference the Earth. I'm going to hit the display line. So the Earth is in the middle. Actually, let me change this to ecliptic. The Earth is in the middle. This is the orbit of the moon, the green line. This is where the moon is, and this is obviously also where we are, so there's a green dot there also. I'm going to turn off the auto zoom. I want to hit SEL to select the periapsis so I can see the periapsis, and actually I need to go into the configuration and set one more thing. Our landing target is going to be CSSC, or the Carl Sagan Space Center. Let's go back into the map. And I need to change my mode over so that I can see the Carl Sagan Space Center information down here as far as our arrival date and our angle of arrival. And I need to go back over here and I'm going to turn on the plan. So, it's funny that this is actually working because I didn't have it shared, but okay, now that I shared it, it's going to reset everything. So let's fix that. Display, auto zoom off, select PE, CSSC, page over, and turn on the plan. Okay. So what we're looking at here, over here we're seeing a zoomed in view of the moon and where we're going to make our burn and fly out. Here we're seeing the same thing, except we're seeing a more zoomed out view of getting back to Earth, which is here in the middle. All this information over here is telling us what these variables are going to do. So it's telling us we're going to arrive at our periapsis altitude, which we want to be 65 kilometers at this time. It's telling us how long that is from now, which is 402,000 seconds. It's saying we're going to have a P velocity of 12.47 kilometers per second. It's showing our PEA, or our arrival point at Earth, is actually going to be 1,000 kilometers below the surface, which means we are on a ballistic trajectory toward Earth. But actually, now that I think about it, that's probably not accurate, because I need to be a little bit closer in time before I get an accurate calculation. So let's time more forward at 100 a little bit here. And you can see we're coming around the moon in orbit. I want to get a little bit closer to the time to do the burn, and then we'll get a much more accurate, maybe even closer than that. There we go. Let me actually jump out and come back in. Okay, so I guess it was getting a pretty accurate one, but I just wanted to make sure. So yeah, it's unacceptable to arrive at Earth 1,300 kilometers below the surface because we're going to die. It's telling us that the Earth is currently 373,100 kilometers away. These, I'm not sure, and they don't really matter to me, but this is telling us where we're going to arrive at Earth. So if we open the map, and here's the Carl Sagan Space Center, which is at 169.5 east and about a degree south of the equator. This is telling us when we get back to Earth, we're going to arrive at 166, which is only going to be 3 degrees before the base, and about 12 degrees north, which is up here, which is way too close to the base. There's no way you can come in at a decent angle into the atmosphere, slow down, and land at the base. You're going to way overshoot and end up over here by the time you get into a position where you can land. So we need to make a lot of changes here in order to have our PEA be 65 kilometers above the surface, or 60 to 65. we need to arrive 45 degrees before the base, so we need this number to be like 124 or lower east, and we want our angle to be around 0, because if it's 0 it means that our trajectory is passing right over the base. So those are the three variables we need to watch: the PEA, the longitude, and the angle. And if we can get those all the way we want them, then we're good to go, and we can just fire the engines, make a few tweaks right after that burn is done to make sure everything's dialed in, and we can fly all the way back to the Earth. We won't have to make any corrections. We'll hit the atmosphere at the perfect time, do a re-entry, slow down, come down in altitude, and land at the base. So now let's go back to our delta velocity over here. So the way we do that, and it sounds complicated, but it's actually harder than it sounds. So let me explain what all of this is. So time to ejection, this is when we're going to burn our engines to go back to Earth. And right now, we're getting these results based on this information over here, just to remind you. So we're going to be burning the engines in about 2050 seconds, which is the same as this. Now, DVF, or forward velocity, this matches, well actually it's not over there, but this is the force of our engines that we're going to use, our delta velocity, or our I guess acceleration, our forward velocity that we're going to use to get back to Earth. So that's DVF is forward backward. There's 3 axes here. Plane change is up and down. So if you're driving in a car, or maybe a plane is a better example, if you're flying in a plane in a straight line and then you raise your altitude or you lower your altitude, that would be the same thing as a plane change. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. DVI is inward and outward, so that's left and right. So if you're flying in that same plane and you turn left or right, that's that axis of direction. So it's basically 3 planes: forward, back, up, down, left, and right. But there's a 4th dimension because there's time involved. So we need to apply energy in all 3 of these axes at a certain time, and we need to do it in order to arrive back at Earth at the exact right time, place, and angle in order to enter the atmosphere without burning up or skipping out, so that we can land at the base. So there are a lot of variables in play. Plus, we're 373,000 kilometers away, rotating or orbiting around the moon, which is orbiting around the Earth, and the Earth is rotating on its axes. So, yeah, if you did this on paper, it would take a long time to make the calculation. So you would have to do it well in advance. I guarantee, unless you're in a class, nobody's doing this on paper. So I need to start making changes, just minor changes to these variables: the time to ejection, the forward, the plane change, the inward. And I need to watch my PEA, my longitude, and my angle to get them all correct. And it requires a little bit of trial and error, but you also need to understand, if I fire a little bit later, the moon is going to be a little bit further along its path. The Earth is going to rotate a little bit further. If I apply more energy, I'm going to get there quicker. So every little change you make will affect all three of these variables at the same time. So it can get dicey really quick. So you don't want to make really big changes to your variables. So let's just pick a one. Let's look at our PEA over here. It's well below the surface, so that's completely unacceptable. We will absolutely die if that happens. So let's just start changing the time of ejection one way or the other and see what that does. Okay, so this is getting me closer to the surface. I'm adding in just 1 second at a time. And it's getting us closer to the surface. It's also bringing down our longitude, which is what we want. We want about 124 degrees east. And what's it doing to our... and it's bringing down our angle. So just adding in 1 second at a time is helping with all three of our variables right now. So I'm just clicking and watching. It would be amazing if all I had to do was change this, but you'll see quickly that something is going to overshoot. See, now we've already overshot our longitude. We're already at 121. We want to be around 124. It doesn't matter that I'm off by 3 degrees or even 10 degrees. It's not that big of a deal, but I definitely don't want to get closer. It's okay if I end up further from the base when I get there, because I can always coast, but I'm not going to be able to stop any quicker. Because you're doing a re-entry and you'll burn up if you're trying to force that re-entry. Well, let's just leave that where it is for a while, because I don't want, actually, I'm going to take a little bit off of that and let it come back a little bit further east. Like that. Now let's go to our forward variable and start seeing what happens when I add or take away from that. Just one click at a time. Okay, so removing velocity, the forward velocity, one click at a time, is also helping my PEA get closer to the surface. It's bringing down my longitude, but not quite as fast as the time did. And actually, I'm going to go back up here and add or take away another couple of seconds here, because I can already see that it's going to overcorrect the other way now. So I'll keep taking away the forward velocity. So essentially we're going to use less energy to help ourselves here. It's bringing down our angle closer to 0. I'm still below the surface by almost 300 kilometers, but okay. We're overshooting again, so I'm going to take out a little bit more time again. Just a few clicks. And let's take out the energy some more. Okay, we're getting really close to the surface now. Actually, we're getting really close to a solution. I'm still 3 kilometers below the surface. I'm at 119 degrees, so I'm about 5 degrees further west than I want to be when I get there, but that's okay. It's okay to be further west. My angle is really close to 0. So let's go back. Do I need to add? No, I need to subtract another second. And actually, I'm going to subtract like several seconds here. Let's go back to velocity. And this is what you need to do. You need to understand what's happening in your mind. And then you kind of need to play with the variables and see if what you're understanding is correct. Okay, now we're above the surface. We're at 15 kilometers, which is way too low. We'll still burn up. 36, 57, 78. Okay, now we're getting really close. This is too high. We'll probably skip out of the atmosphere at this height. so that's not going to be acceptable. Our longitude is pretty good. We're only 2 to 3 degrees, actually, we're only about 1 degree further east or further west than we would want to be, and our angle is not bad. Negative 0.0 or negative 0.3 isn't bad. So now, instead of making changes to the time and the forward, I'm going to go down to plane change and see what happens. So taking it out is making the angle worse. Okay, I'm going to add some positive plane change. That's bringing down my PEA, and it's helping my angle. It's not going to help enough, is it? Because now my angle's going in the other direction. So let's back it off a little bit. And then I'm going to go to the DVI, which is the inward-outward, which is the left-right, and see what that does. Okay, that's helping my angle, but it's making my PEA worse. So let's do some outward. Let's get it down to about 58 kilometers, which is a little bit too low. We might burn up still. But now that I have that overshot a little bit, now I can make another adjustment with the plane change. I'm going the wrong way with the plane change. Yep, I put in too much of something. So let's go back to the DVI and take some of that out. Back to the plane change. There we go. Now I'm getting really close. Angle is 0.04, 0.03, 0.02. Alright, so our angle is basically 0. Our PEA is 64 kilometers above the surface, which is totally acceptable. We can re-enter and hit that low point without burning up in the atmosphere. We're going to arrive, let's open the map over here. We're going to arrive at 122.6 degrees east. So this is the 150 line, this is the 120 line. So we're going to arrive just 2 degrees to the right of that 120 line, 2.5 degrees, and we're going to be at 12 degrees north, so right about there. This is where we're going to be at exactly 64 kilometers above the surface when we get back to Earth. And then, since our angle is 0, it means that we're going to go from that point straight down to the base. So we have this amount of time from here, which is basically, where is that? The Philippines. It's not the best map in the world. Until the Pacific Islands out here. To enter the atmosphere, do our re-entry, slow down, decrease in altitude, and then land at the base. I'm not going to mess with it anymore, because if you start messing with it, you will absolutely get everything out of whack, and it's really hard to recover from that. So let's go back into interplanetary, into the delta velocity. Now I'm going to let the computer make this burn, but once the computer's done burning, I'm going to turn off this plan over here, and then we'll see what our actual trajectory is. The computer will calculate where we're going to be, and then I'm going to make some tiny little tweaks to make sure that our PEA our longitude and our angle are acceptable. So our burn is going to be in about 1270 seconds. Let me turn on the orbit HUD so I can see what's going on. Are we in the sunlight? No. Actually, I want to go ahead and switch over to this and turn off my lights. Since we're in space, nobody needs to see us out here. We'll turn them back on when we come into land at Carl Sagan. But just so you guys can see a little bit better what's going on, I'll get back in this view and I'm going to page over to my burn vector so that you can see the parameters of the burn here. We're going to burn 840.5 meters forward. We're going to have a slight angle upward of 3.3 dV. And we're going to be pointed a little bit outward by 0.5 dV for a total of 840.51 delta velocity. We're going to burn the engines at full thrust for 33.17 seconds, and that's going to happen in 1185 seconds. So let's warp time forward at 10 or 100. Get a little bit closer to that time. 500 seconds, 300 seconds, 200 seconds, 100 seconds. Okay, I'll go back to 10x. Get it down to about a minute. Okay, so about 64 seconds. I'm going to hit the auto burn, which is going to auto align us to where we need to make the burn, and hold that alignment. It'll fire the engines and then cut them off. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the plan over here, so you're not going to see any hypothetical trajectory, but as the engines fire, you'll see our orbit start to grow out. And then once the burn is done, I'm going to use my
translation
thrusters just to clean it up a little bit, because the computer, I mean, this is free software, the computer isn't 100% accurate, and in this case you have to be 100% accurate or you die from a simulation sense. Okay, we're going to burn in about 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1, burning. So if you watch down in the bottom right here, you just watch our orbit develop. It'll take a little bit. But you can already see it. If you're looking on a big screen, you can see it developing out along the moon's orbit. There it goes. It's wrapping around the Earth. It's shutting off here really quickly. Okay, so you can see it has a PEA of 68.5. The longitude is pretty much dead on, and the angle is a little bit off, but we need to make sure that PEA is exactly where we want it. So I'm going to make some little corrective burns. That's the wrong way. I want it right around 65. That's pretty close. I would rather be a little bit under 65 than over 65. And that's it. Our angle is 0. We're going to arrive at 122 degrees, which is about a degree and a half earlier than I wanted to, but that's okay. Earlier is better, later is bad. So, and this is the most important. When you're dealing with re-entry, you absolutely must come in at the correct altitude for your type of vehicle, otherwise you are going to incinerate. So that's it. Now this is extremely accurate. When we get back to Earth, I'm not going to have to do any more burns, and we will be able to re-enter. So let's go back to the regular view since there's... Oops. I'll turn on the orbit moon. I will keep that on for now, but I'll have to change it later. I'm going to bring up the orbit over here, and I'm going to reference the Earth. It's interesting to note the default orbit MFD that comes with Orbiter is not accurate at all. So it thinks when we get back, we're going to be 200 kilometers above the surface. And, well, I guess that's really about all it's going to tell us. But yeah, it's way off compared to this one, which is highly accurate. It's doing, I don't know how many calculations per second. So that's just interesting to see. But I'll leave this one up because the closer we get, once we get under the moon's gravity, then this starts to become more accurate. Let's take a look outside. There's the sun down there. We're at the moon. Let's zoom out a little bit, or a lot. I believe we took off from over here. I'm pretty sure that's where Brighton Beach is. But yeah, there we are. And where's the Earth? It has to be on this plane somewhere, unless I could be looking funny at a funny angle. Let's see. Okay, it has to be on this plane here. Zoom out a little bit. It might actually be hard to see the Earth because of where the sun is. Oh, there it is. There's the Earth. All right, that's where we're going. Hopefully. No, that's exactly where we're going. If you ever need to fly in space and you need somebody to figure it out, I'm your guy. All right, so let's use some time warp and get out away from the moon, and you'll see this orbit MFD doing all kinds of wacky stuff because it's just not accurate at all. Let's go to 1000x. And if you want to see what the arrival time is or have an idea of when you're going to get there, you can watch this PET, which is the time to the periapsis. It's 387,000 seconds. So if I go out to 10,000, it'll count down each of those 10,000ths of a second every second. So we'll just do 10x for a while, or 10,000x for a while. And you can see how close everything's staying. We're still at exactly 0. We're still at 22 degrees east. We're still at 64.66 kilometers above the surface. Okay, I need to start slowing down. Or slowing down the time warp, I mean. So you can see, well, hopefully you can see there's a white dot here. That's us. So we're over halfway back to Earth. Speed up a little bit. We're less than a day from getting back to Earth, only about 48,000 seconds. If you look on the left side over here, you can see we're already experiencing 83% of the Earth's gravity. We haven't made any corrections at all, and we're still at 64.67 kilometer PEA. The exact same longitude basically, and the angle is 0. And there is the Earth arriving, or we're arriving at the Earth, rather. But you can see it coming into view down here. Let's see if I can
Rotation.
go back to real time here. Let's pull up the HUD so I have some sort of reference to see what I'm doing. I'll point toward the Earth. Looks like we're going to come in on the dark side, so... Oops. Let's get turned right side up, relative to our trajectory anyway. Alright, we can warp time forward a little bit again. You can see we're getting closer and closer to the Earth. Go back to real time so that I can try to keep it in the window. Actually, I can just power off this other MFD. It would be more interesting to see if the sun wasn't on the other side of the planet. I can't time warp too quick because it's going to start happening quickly. In fact, we're about a half hour away from our periapsis. And I haven't done this in a long time. Let me put up the surface. I'm going to warp time forward a little bit so that we can get closer. We're still about 3,000 kilometers away, 2,000. I want to get to about 1,000. There we go. So the next stage of this flight is re-entry. Re-entry, deceleration, and landing. Right now we're traveling at about 9.8 kilometers per second, which is pretty fast. It's over 20,000 miles an hour. And of course, we want to land. So we need to eliminate all that velocity. And we're going to do it through atmospheric braking during our re-entry into the atmosphere. So what I'm doing right now, let me pull up my surface MFD so I can see my angle of attack. I'm setting my angle of attack initially at negative 50 degrees. There we go. Get my wings level to my direction of flight here. To give you an idea of what's going on here, let's go outside. So I'm basically belly down to my direction of travel, which is this way. And I have my nose pointed at a high angle of attack, or in this case, a negative angle of attack in toward the planet. And what that's going to do, actually let me get this set up better. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy. I just want to see from the side. So what that's going to do as we come into the atmosphere, the air is going to be coming this way and hitting the bottom of the vessel and helping to slow us down. And then I'll be changing the angle of attack back and forth to control my vertical speed, either ascent or descent. Alright, let's jump back in. We're still about 600 kilometers away, and once we hit 120 kilometers, that's entry interface, which I talked about in the previous video, which doesn't have a lot of use when you're going up into orbit, but it carries a lot of weight when you're coming back and going through a re-entry procedure, because that means we'll be getting into the atmosphere. And what I'm going to be doing currently, we're falling at about 2.6 kilometers per second. I want to try to get that zeroed out, or slightly negative but probably no more than about 100 meters per second negative, because I don't want to descend too quickly. If we do descend too quickly, we'll heat up and burn up. If we go a positive rate on our vertical speed, we'll skip out of the atmosphere, and then we would have to go around and burn fuel and try again. And speaking of fuel, let me switch back over to this view and go down. I'm going to dump the rest of the fuel.
Warning, fuel dump.
We're going to come in dead stick just like the space shuttle.
Warning, fuel dump. Warning, fuel dump. Warning, fuel dump.
And I need to dump my fuel.
Warning, main fuel low. Warning, fuel dump. Warning, main fuel depleted. System warning, reset. Oxygen low. System reset.
Okay, we got an oxygen low warning because it does that when you hit less than 10%. But we still have a day of oxygen remaining. But I just got rid of all of our main fuel, so we have no more main fuel, which is good, because we want to be nice and light when we're coming into the atmosphere. And I wanted to get rid of that before we get into the atmosphere, because you don't want to be dumping fuel when it's 2,000 degrees outside. That wouldn't be good, right? I also need to turn on the APU so that I can close the radiator, because if that's open, that's going to cause a weakness in the airframe, which is going to cause us to overheat and disintegrate. I'm also going to manually set my center of gravity to about negative 0.245, somewhere in there. And then I can turn off the APU again for now, till we get inside the atmosphere to conserve some fuel. You'll be able to watch on the lower right, watch our orbit get a lot smaller, because right now the top of our orbit is all the way out at the moon's orbit. So it's about 300, I don't know, somewhere around 375,000 kilometers away, I'm sure. And as we slow down, that will come closer and closer into the Earth until it goes suborbital, and then eventually we'll flip over upright and go into a normal descent toward the base and land. Alright, we're about 12 kilometers before entry interface. I'm going to turn on the APU.
Pitch on.
I'm going to turn on my surface controls. I already have my center of gravity set. Quick sanity check. We just entered the atmosphere. I'm probably not going to be able to talk too much. Once again, here's what we look like coming in. We're going to start heating up. And hopefully we won't heat up so much that we burn up. But right now I need to watch my vertical speed and my vertical acceleration in order to keep that close to zero or slightly negative. We're still falling at about 500 meters per second. Our velocity seems to be holding steady. It's actually decreasing a little bit at about 10.5 kilometers per second. I'm going to have to pitch out a little bit, and because I'm inverted, all of my flight controls are backward. So, yeah, if you decide that you want to mess around with Orbiter and you start trying to do re-entries, you're probably going to burn up dozens of times before you finally figure out what you need to do in order to not burn up. It takes a lot of practice. Okay, our temperature's already about 1500 degrees on the nose. You can see our orbit has already shrunk significantly down in the bottom right over there. We're down to about 10 kilometers per second. Getting a little bit lower than I would like to, so I'm going to decrease our vertical speed closer to 0.
Warning, hull temperature.
We're warming up.
APU fuel 90%. Warning, hull temperature.
We don't want to warm up too much, so I'm going to bring my
Warning, hull temperature.
altitude up significantly
Warning,
more.
Hull temperature.
Give you a look
Warning,
outside.
Hull temperature.
What's going on? Okay. Now we seem to be at a pretty good altitude, so I'm going to go back into the negative. We're down to about 8.8 kilometers per second. Our orbit is getting much smaller. Vertical speed is back into the negative. But this is a pretty good altitude here. I'm getting pretty good drag. We're decelerating at about 17 meters per second per second.
Mach 26.
Orbital speed is about 7.5 kilometers per second. We're at about 8 kilometers per second
25.
right now. We need to get suborbital. Okay, I'm digging down a little bit further than I want to, so let me try to reduce my
Mach 24.
vertical speed a little bit. Alright, we're coming suborbital right now.
Mach 23.
Want to get slowed down quite a bit more, and then I'm going to turn the vessel back upright and
Mach
continue
22.
our descent.
Mach 21.
I don't want to descend quite that quickly.
Mach 20.
Alright, pretty quick here. I'm going to go ahead and flip it over. And we will heat up temporarily when that
Hull
happens.
Temperature. Warning, airframe overheating. Warning, hull temperature.
Okay,
Warning,
we're doing
hull
okay.
Temperature. Warning, hull temperature.
I'm going to turn it back over because I don't want to climb. That was a little bit of a messy re-entry, but it worked nonetheless. I'm going to switch my MFD over here. Target CSSC, page over project. It looks like we have a successful re-entry. Now I just need to get to the base. So I'm just letting my vertical speed come back to at least neutral or negative, because I don't want to climb, otherwise we're going to climb out of the atmosphere. And we don't want that. Okay. I'm going to set an AOA autopilot of about 40 degrees. and engage that. Alright. Let me make some small adjustments to that so that we can line up better. On the bottom right, actually I can probably switch to the bigger view now that I'm not having major stress with the re-entry. I'm setting my angle of attack using a program called Aerobrake MFD.
Information. APU fuel 80%.
Basically what this does is
Mach
it shows
19.
where I am, which is going to be really hard to see on a mobile device. The yellow square is the base, and this box up here is a zoomed in view of that. So the base is in the middle. The green line coming in is our trajectory toward the base. And I can make adjustments to the autopilot to try to get I don't think I want to turn that far to the left. I can make adjustments so that we're basically headed straight for the base. I do want to arrive a little bit west of the base because we're going to land on runway 9. So we want to arrive to the base, to the west of it, so we can
Mach
fly east
18.
and land. You can see we're still heating up. Let me see if I can get the camera turned over. So this is looking at the top view of the ship. We're coming over the ocean. We're still decelerating. We turn my surface HUD back on. We're still traveling at about 5.5 kilometers per second. We're about 59.5 kilometers above the Earth. If we look at our orbit, you'll see we are suborbital. I mean, if we stop doing anything, we're going to hit the ground. But thanks to our attitude hold autopilot, I can set my AOA and it will hold it for me.
Mach 17.
And then I just use Aerobrake to set my autopilot parameters to arrive near the base where I want to be. I can also look at different views. So this is going to be our descent profile. We're coming down. We're going to follow this green line. We're going to keep slowing and falling, slowing and falling, slowing and falling, slowing and falling, which is a pretty good descent profile. The gray line is actually the best descent profile, but I'm a little off from that, but I don't think I've ever been on the ideal descent profile. Let's go back over to this page.
Mach 16.
This also tells me that we're going to land in about 700 seconds, or about 11 or 12 minutes. Our velocity when we get there is going to be about 119 meters per second. This is the position that we're going to arrive at, which is close to the base, but it's still west of the base. You can look at us. Actually, let's pull up a map over here. Change my display lines to orbit plane. Let's turn on tracking and let's zoom in. So here, actually I can target the base. Alright. So we came into the atmosphere, we hit the atmosphere right about there where my mouse is. We did our re-entry, we started decelerating, blah blah blah, all that stuff.
Mach 14.
We're currently here, which is probably about, I don't know, 15 degrees before the base. And we are right on track to line up with the base and land. So our calculations way back at the moon were almost perfect. I mean,
Information. APU fuel 70%.
For all intents and purposes, it was perfect. My re-entry could have been a little less bumpy, but right at the end there.
Mach 13.
But we survived, and that's all that really matters, right? Any re-entry you can walk away from is a good re-entry. And if you start messing around with orbit, you'll figure that out really quick. I know pilots say that about landings, but re-entry, man, that is a killer. Landings are easy. We go back to this view again. Oops. Turn on the surface. So, since I have the base targeted, this little
Mach 12.
This little caret here is pointing toward where the base is. We are going to head a little bit to the west of it, so we're not heading straight for it, because I want to be able to have enough room to get lined up for the landing. I need to fix my elevator trim quick. Actually, maybe I'm not going to fix my elevator trim. I guess the autopilot is using it. That's fine. I'm going to turn off my RCS mode because we have plenty of air now. We can use our surface controls. We still have 1 day, 9 hours and 25 minutes of oxygen. Our coolant temperature is rising because we don't have our radiator out, but it won't rise quick enough to cause a problem by the time we land. I'm going to go up and turn on my nav beacon and strobe lights because we're coming into land. And we don't want to get hit by an airliner or something. Even though we're way higher than any airliner right now, we're still about 46.5 kilometers above the surface. And if we want to know what that is in feet, we're at about
Mach 10.
149,000 feet. And no airplanes fly that high, so we're still traveling at about 7,000 miles an hour. But we are still decelerating. If we take a look outside again, we're still heated up. And we're over the Pacific, so there isn't much to see. If I zoom, let's get a head down view or a top down view, and I'll zoom way out. You can see where we are on the planet. There's Australia Night. You have all the Pacific Islands around in this area here. Thailand, China, Japan. Well, Japan's up here, China's up here. Vietnam. All right, let me zoom back in on us. We're way down here. And in the real world, we would be in radio blackout, excuse me, for a lot longer than a capsule would, because capsules kind of just drop right through the atmosphere, whereas we can glide, so we spend a lot more time in re-entry than other craft tend to do. Zoom in a little bit closer here. You can see, you probably can't see, but we're about 300, actually it says it up here, we're about 390 kilometers from the base. We're coasting, we have no fuel. I'm going to turn off this HUD.
7.
Okay, we're at Mach 7, about 2,160 meters per second. It looks like we're going to come in. Yeah, we're going to land at in the daytime. That's nice. That makes it a little bit easier. You can't really. Let me switch over to this view. You can see here we are coming in. We're going to arrive about
Mach 6.
86 kilometers west of the base, which is fine because I'm still going to have to set up
Information. APU fuel 60%.
I'm still going to have to set up a final approach. Take another look outside. We'll be cooling down pretty quick here. Let's see, what's our temperature? Yeah, it's only about 270 degrees on the nose. Once we get down to about
Mach 5.
24, 23 kilometers, somewhere around there, I'll turn off the autopilot and hand fly it in the rest of the way. I don't think we can see the base because of the clouds. It would be, oh, actually, I think it's right over there. I think I can see it through the base, or through the clouds, I mean. So there's the base, which is on an island. It's the same place that we took off when we went to the moon. And I like to use this one because it's close to the equator, and it's just nicer than taking off at Cape Canaveral. Okay, you can see we're not heated up anymore. Let's get back inside because I'm going to have to start flying in a little bit here. Let me just check everything out. Need a slight sanity check because I haven't landed in a while.
Mach 3.
Okay, everything looks in the proper configuration. Yeah, you can definitely see the island out there. We're down to about 26 kilometers above the surface. We're only traveling at Mach 3 now. Alright, I am going to need to cancel the autopilot pretty soon here. And I'm just gonna fly it in VFR, so I'm not gonna use any instrument approaches. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect the autopilot. Let it settle a little bit. There's you can see the base right over here. Let me take out some of this trim because I don't want to climb. I want to keep going down here. If you see the caret up here, this represents the direction of the base. That's going to keep moving toward 90. Once it's over 90, then I know I can turn in toward the base and I'll be basically lined up with the runway. So we're just coasting along here. I'm actually going to switch this over to surface so I can see my indicated airspeed. I'm going to start turning just a little bit so that, oops, not quite that far, because that caret is almost over 90 degrees. I don't really want to overshoot the runway and have to turn back the other way. Looks like I might have anyway. That's okay. Can make a little steeper turn, get over there a little bit quicker. And now it's kind of just like a flight simulator for the most part. Okay, let's roll out.
Subsonic.
Okay, we're under Mach 1 now. I'm going to set my trim so I don't want to get too low. And I will have more lift the lower I get in the atmosphere. So we'll just glide like this for a little bit. Now I can line back up with the runway because that caret is over the 90-degree mark. So let's turn in a little bit and level off.
Information. APU fuel 50%.
Okay, I'm banked slightly left. There we go. Okay, I can take out some of that trim because we're coming into the thicker part of the atmosphere. We're basically lined directly up with the runway. And we're just going to glide right down in. Once I get everything kind of settled here, we'll look outside. There you can see the island out there. The runway is like right there, and it runs directly east and west. I'm going to change the color of my HUD so that it's a little bit easier to see. I guess we'll use that color. Okay, let me trim down a little bit. I still want to lose some altitude. I don't want to overshoot the runway. Get a little bit to the left of the runway, so I'm just going to bank ever so slightly right and try to make that correction. And then back to center. I'm a little bit off to the right, aren't I? Right about there. Take out some more of that trim. We're drifting a little bit south, so going through a cloud layer there. Well, actually, in this version of Orbiter, there's only one cloud layer, so now we're below it. So now if we look outside, you can see a lot clearer the island out there. I can zoom in a little bit on us. We're just coasting in. I would say on fumes, but we don't even have fumes. We're empty. We left all of that fuel in space. Okay, just trying to dial in our alignment a little bit here. As long as I don't do anything stupid on the landing. This was a pretty good, highly precise mission.
5,000.
We only did less than an 800 meter per second burn when we took off from the moon. We flew all the way back to Earth without making any course corrections. We re-entered and we're going to land without any fuel. Okay, we're only about 29 kilometers away, 4 kilometers up. Let me make another slight adjustment. We're pretty much dead nuts to the runway here. I will probably have to slow down a little bit, but we'll see what happens when I put out the gear. Once we get the landing clearance, I think at 3 kilometers we will put the gear down.
3,000.
Or maybe it's 2,500 kilometers, or 2,500 meters. I can't remember. Like I said, I haven't landed in a while. Need to correct a little bit.
You are cleared to land.
Okay, let's put the gear down. That's going to make us drop our nose, so I'm going to have to trim out for the gear.
Gear down and locked.
I don't think I'm going to need any air brake.
$2,000.
Take a look outside. You can see us coming in here. Our gear is down. Got a nice
information. APU fuel 40%.
Got a nice descent into the runway here. It might be a little bit high, so I'm just going to let the nose drop a little bit and then I'll level it back off because I'm seeing all white on the poppies out there. I want to see 2 white, 2 red, and then I'll know I'm on the proper glide slope.
900.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bring up my nose a little bit.
800.
Put it right about on the end of the runway.
700.
Make another little correction here.
600.
Still a little bit high, so let the nose drop just a
500.
smidge. Now I'll look real quick. Our maximum touchdown speed
400.
is around 4.2 meters per second. So I need to touch it down nice and light.
300.
There we go. I'm getting 1 red.
200.
There we go. 2 red, 2 yellow. Perfect glide slope. Oh, now I'm getting a little bit low. Now we're just going to have
100.
to manually fly her in.
75. 50. 40. 30.
I'm going to start my flare a little bit early.
20. 15. 10. 7. 5. 2. Touchdown.
There we go. Oop. It's a little squirrely. Let's give it some brake.
100 knots. Wheel stop.
And there we are. We landed. And that's where we took off from, back there when we went to the moon the first time. So this was a successful return to Earth from the moon. I have no idea how long this video is. I mean, that was a centerline touchdown at pretty much just above stall speed, so it was just about perfect. I didn't even use half of the runway to stop. I only used about a third of the runway to come to a complete stop, and my hangar is right over there. So now we can go ahead and
using external O2.
Have them hook us up to the external O2.
External cooling online.
We can kill our lights. We can open our cabin hatch up on top. And then they can come and get us out of here. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. If I made it look easy, it's not. It takes hundreds of hours to learn re-entries, to learn how to use the various variables to set up your trajectories and your routes to different planets or from moons to planets. And it takes a while even just to learn how to land. But once you put it all together, it's a lot to learn. So like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.